welcome to the Founders Foyer with me, Aishwarya. This foyer is full of conversations, a space where creators, founders, and builders can look for all the inspiration and concepts and support to grow their ideas into products. So, you've got a great idea, and you've been building out the initial version of your product. And with a little bit of socializing around, you see that people are starting to gain some interest. So, there is a bit of momentum. Obviously, the thought of building a community is something that will definitely cross your mind for sure. But building a community and engaging with that early set of believers is something that needs a lot of dedicated effort and consistency. So today's conversation is going to be exactly about making those connections and investing in a proper community. Because joining me today is Jain, a product manager at Apple. She's also a creator who runs Product Career, a community with 30K plus people across different social platforms. And she shares knowledge about early career product management. I've been a great fan of her videos, and I'm so glad she's here today to talk to us. Hi, Nazuk. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Aishwarya.
Awesome. Let's probably start with your story about wanting to build a close-knit community for an early product management folks. So how did this idea start, and what was the start of this, and how important you felt it was at that point in time?
Sure. So this all started, I think, we're in the middle of pandemic and suddenly, there's so much additional time in hand. So truly it was the idea came during that time. But since I am a product manager myself, and along the way, I have been mentoring, nothing too extensive, but, and I'm talking, this is 2020, fall of 2020, right? That's when I started Product Career basically. And I had been mentoring, junior PMs along the way. And I just saw a very consistent theme of just very, very common questions, new PMs go through, and including myself. For me, I didn't choose product management as my career. I stumbled upon this role. I started out as a business analyst, and then, I moved into product, got inspired by a senior product manager on my team. So I didn't actively decide, okay, this was my career path I wanted to go in. Mm. But the fact is that there was so limited knowledge available, and product managers learn a lot on the job. And sometimes, as I was mentoring before, and I was thinking, wow, maybe, I'm sharing a lot of the knowledge. Maybe perhaps I can start to put on social media. And because in the pandemic, we all had, extra time on hand, that's where it kind of started. I wanted to stay. This is my area of love and passion. So that's what I wanted to get started with as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I definitely dig into a lot of points that you made, especially the fact that how you transitioned into being a PM. As somebody who did the same, so I guess I can totally vibe with you there. That you need to recognize that path, and often for some of us who did that, it does feel like an idea to give back in terms of, hey, let me go ahead and help another person do the same thing. So I think you brought about an important point on not just keeping the idea with you, but when there's a spark, let's just get it out there. And often a lot of us struggle with that, right? Like, we think about, okay, I have this, I think I can talk about this, but we don't get to make the first step towards getting that out and just seeing where it goes and how people receive it. So I think, that's a great story. So thanks for sharing with me, Nazuk. Yep. So I think just as a panel question to that, we're talking about how important it is to get that first step out there to find a niche for yourself. So for a lot of them these days who either build like side hustles or who go on to become like a full-time founder or very, very new into the community. And when they start to build their products, I think they always have this question about, is this the right time to build a community? Because, let's face it, community is more like everybody talks about community. They're like, oh, you don't have a community? I think you should start one. So I guess there's a lot of fad around community. So when do you think is the right time somebody should think about starting a community? And are there like any prior thoughts or like a list of things that you would suggest that we go through?
Yeah. So first of all, very quick and short answer is there's no right time to build a community. There is really literally no right time to build one. I think what is more important is finding your passion with a niche, with a topic that you absolutely love. Because that is what I think has helped me to keep going throughout. If I go back, in the fall of 2020, October, November timeframe, that's when I started. Some of my initial posts that I did, and I chose Instagram to start with, very, I want to say, a surprising platform, if you will, choosing Instagram and then product management steps, sharing stories, kind of, it doesn't, in the first instance, it may not sit well. But the reason I've been able to grow this in such a short time, getting it to 30K now and a community there, is because one, I'm absolutely passionate about product management. So for me, it doesn't feel like work getting on there and talking about product management, talking about the challenges that I have faced myself in my career along the way, sharing learnings, the things maybe if I went back 10 years, how would I start again? So for me, it doesn't feel like work. That's why, it helps to build that consistency, if you would, because eventually, consistency is what's going to help you grow, right? It's easy to say, oh, let's start a community. It's easy to say that, but to grow it long term and really have that thriving community, consistency is the key, and that long term gain sort of mindset, it has to be there. One of the things I made a huge mistake was initially I started with all platforms. I thought, maybe I had to be everywhere. But that was one of the biggest mistake, because each platform and building the community requires a lot of time to kind of give to the community, right? If you really truly want to have that, there's a concept, there's a book, and there's a concept of 1,000 true fans. When you're building a community, you want to have those 1,000 true fans. So if you want to have that kind of, community, then it can't be everywhere, especially for, like founders or creators or builders who are just starting. You can't be everywhere, especially if it's like a side hustle. So that was one of my initial mistakes. But then I realized quickly, I wanted to focus. So then I narrowed down to, 2 platforms, and that's where I'm most active. And that's where I have my community, both Instagram and LinkedIn now. I am on TikTok as well, but that's video platform separately. But yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely makes sense. I think you brought out a very important struggle that almost everybody goes through when they want to start a community or when they want to start talking about what they're building out on the social media. I've been on the same side where there are thoughts in terms of, okay, so I have this here. How do I repurpose this onto another platform? Is it right for me to get started? I think that urge just comes forward in the sense that, okay, you know what, let me just go ahead and find my audience across all these platforms. And that's definitely a challenging journey to pick the right ones that work for you. And I'm glad that you mentioned about what really worked for you, and you took that decision to stick to it and sort of take your channel out there and then go on to do the other things in the meantime. So that makes sense. I think that's a great point for any early founder to think about. And now that we're talking about these tools and channels to get started, I guess this is one huge challenge. And often people are just skeptical about which one really works for me. And considering the fact that each channel on its own, like whether it's Slack, whether it's Discord, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Twitter, I think all of them have a certain format and certain, in terms of, I wouldn't call them limitations, but certain set of instructions to follow through for each of these platforms. So how did you navigate that, and how did you arrive at picking these 2 platforms that you thought would work for you?
Yeah, the way I like to think about this is, one is your, external facing, if you will. We're going to call them external facing. We're going to call them all the social media. You have your Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, whatever you want to build, right? That's your external. And that's also something, I think, picking one or 2 of those platforms is also important, because otherwise, how else is somebody going to find your community, right? Unless it's talked about on any of the social medias, and how are people going to, find out about it? So that social media, those channels work as, like, if you will, like top of the funnel, like bringing in the community, the people, your target audience for that. Then second level of that is also, Slack or Discord or Telegram channels where you can build, a more tight knit community, if you will. There are several
Mhm.
private communities where you can have, more candid conversation with your community, more, like more like a, family, if you would, it's like an internal conversation, something you can have live chats, things like that to really, give to the community. And also another factor of that is people are a lot more sometimes open, within those, I guess, closed, channels as well,
Mhm.
or like Slack or Discord, to be, sharing. So eventually, if we are just truly building that community, I think it is important to have a flavor of both. Obviously, starting with both is tough. Is first, is I think the first kind of step is to finding that, bit of the market fit for the idea that we have, as creators, finding that on social media and then bringing that audience, in a private community in some form. I think there's two kind of levels to that.
Mhm. So basically, one feeds into the other, and like you could start with one and then like see where it naturally transitions to, and then take the other one into the picture. Yeah, that seems okay. Yeah, something definitely worth an experiment to try, I guess, for each person's idea, like you said, where it
Yeah.
finds its product market fit. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
It's just that I've seen, like if I were to, like, let's say, start all over with product career, and if
Mm.
nobody knows about product career, what do I do? And if I had only, let's say, a Discord channel right now, nobody, can find out about it unless it's talked about, right? Unless there's a way, maybe I go to LinkedIn, I post about something, or maybe Instagram or Twitter, you know. So there has to be some form of like social kind of channel where at
Mm.
least, people can find out about it, right?
Mm.
So I
Mm.
think that way, if we think about community, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true. That's true. Like, yeah, before posting about it, also have like a better picture about the purpose behind this community and where would you find your first set of following, right? And that really makes sense. In fact, now that we're talking about finding the first set of people, I have another question for you, which is often, yeah, these first set of people on your network is they're going to most likely stick with you throughout the community phase, right? So, from your experience, what was your learning in terms of engaging and like sort of activating their presence on this community? Like, did you try and do a few things to have those on your community?
I did. There was a lot of initially when, and so this is the beauty actually of having a smaller account. A lot of people think that we need accounts with a lot of following and a lot of people, but the beauty of having a smaller account is that you can build those connections, those one-on-one connections with a lot of people. You can answer the queries, but as your account grows, if you're a single, solopreneur, solo creator type thing going on, trying to build a side hustle, at some point it gets out of hand with the amount of DMs you get, and if you have multiple social channels, to make sure you're able to, kind of attend to the questions that you're coming in with,
Hmm.
right? All the people are coming with. So initially, to your point, right, activating some of that is, I spent a lot of time, kind of understanding, listening to questions and queries and concerns that a lot of these, early career product managers, some of the fresh graduates, also some of the like mid-level to senior PMs too, like, hey, I face the certain same thing, myself. The content that I would post, I'd get a feedback, and then that would lead to a conversation. So giving time and being able to talk to your community, really give back with the knowledge, sometimes even just kind of people want to share their experience. Oh yeah, same thing happened with me
Hmm.
also, right? It gets
Yeah.
into that moment. So being able to just build those connections really help that initial foundational community, and getting those initial just strong following, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, like build conversations at the start. Yeah, totally. And I for sure know that you used to spend like with every person who comes into your community. I've seen you like pinging them and sort of reaching out to them and trying to see how you can be of help. And I think that's a great practice at the start of somebody who's just trying to offer something and sort of understanding what's it on the other side of things. So that's like a great activity, or I would even call it an exercise that you did. Just curious, did that like probably take you towards a certain direction? Like with those conversations, did you get to see any interesting trends or patterns that helped you back with your idea of having a community built like this?
I think it just solidified my idea.
Hmm.
It just very much, with the thought, the initial thought of what I started with, like I wanted to share the knowledge with the new, PMs, early career PMs. General idea of what I started with, it just solidified as I went along, as I heard, a lot of the, challenges people were, facing. It just solidified as I kept going. And again, community building, we have, again, I'm going to go back to my point of, finding that love and passion for a topic, for a niche, because it takes time, it takes effort, and you'll, personally have to trade off maybe some TV time, like maybe give up some Netflix or something eventually, because community building will take, time, but it
Hmm.
is very rewarding, I will say, at the end of it, hearing from a lot of my, community members, hearing that they found a job, or they've landed a job, or they've gotten a promotion, or any of that, would just, it's like it acts like a, fuel to my fire. So helps keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you start taking energy from them, from those conversations, from what's happening around, and it does feel satisfying at the end of the day. And you again, I think you mentioned a very important point, which is the time that it takes, because often with a lot of dissents about these algorithms and how these social platforms function, I guess a lot of instant gratification is something that people like fall into the trap without even realizing that they're going towards that direction. Because often it's like, hey, I started this like a week back, but I still don't have followers on this. Or that's absolutely a genuine issue. But I guess, like you said, putting in that consistent effort and getting that time is something that we have to keep in mind before having to worry about something not picking up on its feet. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good point. And since we sort of have these folks who come back to you and who probably talk to you, I think that's a great way of having community connections and making them sort of talk to each other on the community. So, were there like any learnings that you had or anything that you observed where you started seeing that folks within your community started extending favors, started helping one another? Because one thing that you want to do with community as a early founder, or even as a creator, is there is your presence, but you want your community to sort of independently function while you act like a catalyst over there. So did you like have any such moments on your community where you felt like, hey, this is great?
Yeah. So this goes back to my point of having social channel versus having a private community. When you have a private community, eventually folks, are a lot more comfortable. And then it's a very natural progression to, for communities, if you're building the real community, that for natural progression for people to start exchanging ideas and start connecting with each other. What I saw within mine was, there were a lot of job postings. People would start to
Hmm.
post, hey, we have an opening within our team or within. And so I started to see a lot of that. People wanted to do projects together. So they were able to connect, So eventually that's a very natural progression for any community from the ground up again. But it's very important to kind of also, and I give this example. There's a book called Hooked. It's by me, Ryers, and I
Yeah.
love that book. It's a very beginner friendly book to kind of understand that idea of, how if you can reward your community in some way to with their participation, and that reward, is one of the great examples that I've seen in this. There's a senior PM, Lenny Richitsky,
Yeah.
and in his community, in his Slack channel, it's a very active community. And what I saw is a lot of people post on it, and I'm a, a follower, and I love Lenny's content, by the way. And so what I saw is he takes a lot of the, kind of the wisdom that is shared within this, Slack channel private community, he'll post on his Substack as well as part of his newsletter. So there is a reward involved for the people who are participating. So it's ultimately your communities are built, eventually we want everybody to participate. So what is kind of the model that can be built around that community? I think it's, if we as creators, builders can think about, rewarding communities for their participation in some way, I think that would be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And yeah, I'm a great fan of Lenny's work here as well. So you brought it up in the right conversation, I guess. And yeah, I think one of the things that I was also sort of trying to get at, and which you answered partly with this, is how do you take the momentum that gets built over here and get that reward out for the extended audience? Because that is one way that they can discover the community. They can see that, oh, I see a peer of mine has just gotten some value out of this community. So how about me considering to join there? Or how about me trying to go and look at the content, just get an idea? And I guess, yeah, Lenny and even you, both of you have been doing it really well with respect to starting at certain point and then sort of trying to disseminate from there and get more folks to see what's happening around. I think it's a very important practice for new folks to try and consider, is that have like a single source of truth and have a dissemination from there, and where you can try to bring in more folks and get them onto the source. So yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And yeah, my extended question to that would be, I know you also like run a newsletter, and you also had like a recent course that you just set up. And it's good that there is this information that goes to the early community that you built. So you sort of can use the community as a leverage to get this up and running. So was it because of certain findings that you had from running this community, or what led you into the course and newsletter projects?
Absolutely. So exactly that. It's just when I got a similar questions that led to the blogs that I wrote, that led to Medium blogs or starting, a newsletter. All of my questions, all of my conversations have led me to write this. And eventually I got to a point where I was asked the same question so many times. And I thought, okay, maybe I can, instead of going in DMs and answering, or going in one-on-one sessions, how do I scale this information? So I thought, a course would be a good way for me to do it, present that information in, like recorded sessions. So I went, took me hundreds of hours of, pouring all of that information, going through my DMs, asking a lot of feedback from the community, with the challenges that they've been, facing, running a lot of surveys and things like that. Finally, got it into like a recorded session so that it can help somebody. It can help, going from that. Sometimes, there's a lot of information, of course, available online too. But what happens is, okay, the people who came to me, they were like, okay, I've taken this free course. What do I do now? How do I, it's some of the people that I've interacted with have been like, okay, I did the course, I did the interviews, I cracked the interviews, I have the job. What do I do now? I'm still stuck, right? So it's like every stage of the process needs mentorship, right? For me also, I'm at a different, place in my career right now, but I have relied on my mentors as well. So to get to that next level. So I think it's a chain. If we can, kind of build the community, help the next generation of product managers eventually, I think that is my goal. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, all the best for this goal. I think it's great the way you put it. I would definitely want to be a part of this whole purpose, especially the way that you said how it's taken from smaller steps, and how do you map that with each person's stage of their career, right? So I guess a lot of times that we might have probably crossed the path, or we might do that a little later, or we have certain experiences to share. So I think it's important to get that out to the community. And with the way you say it, I also see another happenstance that was here, which is how do you figure out what comes up from the base problem that you have? So the base problem here was, how do you just try and engage these folks? How do you help them transition? But I think continuously putting yourself out there and listening to their problems sort of helps you realize that there are other parent problems to solve for. So I think that's definitely like a byproduct that you get from a community, I guess, where you start,
Yeah.
yeah, you start understanding what's a larger picture here and like what are the other things that I can lead towards. So yeah, that's wonderful.
Beauty of product management is it's like it's not one size fits all, right? There's so
Yep.
many flavors of it depending on which type of organization you've worked in, which type of product you've worked on, or and different levels as you grow in your career. So there's just I think we need a lot more people sharing their journeys within this space to really
Yeah.
help that next generation.
Yeah, I am glad people are actually doing that. Like as a person who transitioned to product management and starting my early career over there, I had a lot of questions, and I think for me, somewhere I thought, okay, as I learn, let me keep writing about my learnings, and I saw that a lot of PMs from different walks of their careers sort of came through to help and share their learnings as well. So I'm glad that the sense is kicking around and people are trying to contribute back. And like I said, I would absolutely, love to see more folks doing that. And there was a particular area I think is still gray, is what I realized. With like I try to mentor folks who just trying to enter into PM as well, more like who transition from other roles to this. So I guess there's could be a lot more content around how did people transition to being into product roles, because often we come from other job functions and other product domains into product management. So I guess it would be great to see a lot more content from you and from all of us together on it's okay and how do you like come from different domains over here, and how do you sort of go about learning the skills needed for the role. So yeah, absolutely new domains to kickstart.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So, now we're talking about the effort that goes into it. The amount you said, hundreds of hours of recording content. So, obviously, I guess for building a community, you need a lot of that initial, set of force of content or material that has to engage your first set of believers, and who then go on to bring in more believers into the community. So, what's the like? Do you have content calendars, or how do you generally suggest somebody who's just new to plan and get your the engaging materials out? Like, what are some steps that you followed in your journey?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I'm going to try to break it down into a few things that have
Feel
worked
free.
for. All right. So, one thing I like to say is don't work the platform. Don't let the platform work you. What I mean by that is, you work the platform, meaning we have to, as creators, find out what works on the platform. A lot of times, we end up choosing, sometimes we will say, oh, reels are working on Instagram. Let's start posting reels. Or, TikTok is a great platform. Oh, people are making, there's a lot of momentum you can build on TikTok. Let's get on TikTok. Or LinkedIn is investing in, creators. So maybe LinkedIn is a good platform to build. Maybe Twitter is. There's all sorts of, whoever has gotten, this is something I kind of learned along the way as well in my creator journey, if you will. Whatever platform works for people, that's the platform people preach about, right? Ultimately, I think what is important, I have boiled it down to kind of two things. We have to pick, when we are thinking about writing content or any type of content, I think we have to see two things. Either is you want to have a written content or you want to have a video content. You can decide your platforms based on that. If you're good in writing, or if that is your interest, then you should pick platforms that are, kind of complementary for that skill, right? If video is if you're not camera shy, you're okay for being on video, then you pick a video platform, the platform that's gonna kind of amplify your content. And when you're starting with content, also another thing is your first 10 posts. If somebody is starting from scratch, and if I'm starting from scratch, I'm telling myself, first 10 posts, forget, you're going to get any traction. There's going to be a lot of crickets along the way. But I think it is still important to do a decent enough job with your content, because eventually that is what somebody is going to see and then come. But still don't get hung up in perfectionism, right? You want to get it out, because what happens is, for creators also, it's a cycle of, at first, we get through a lot of, is this good enough? Am I putting the best content out? You go through a lot of that, overthinking and, self-doubt yourself. But once you put it out, creators also, kind of gain that confidence. Okay, now that is out, I can do the next. And you start, maybe one person will follow you, or maybe 5 people or 10 people. You start to talk to them. You start to hear, what are their challenges. From there, little by little, you start to invest in your own content, finding out information from the challenges that you're hearing. I think content creation is somebody is doing, and I am doing this on part, like as a side hustle on part time. I have a full time job, my just weekends, and then sometimes in the evening I spend time. It's important to keep in mind, the momentum and the growth is going to come only and only from that consistent effort. Not like, you post one day, 1 week, and then you're like, crickets for a month. Just a very consistent effort. Maybe pick, maybe 1 or 2 days in a week. That's okay. Creators have to also find their own rhythm with, starting out with the content.
Yeah. I think, like you said, each person would have a different cadence, different way of planning their week out. So consistency, being very sure about what is the way that you want to start, like which direction you want to go, content in terms of like writing text, or content in terms of videos, and then choosing the platform based on that way. I think that these are like very practical steps that like I can see how you would have probably navigated the same phase when you started product career community. So yeah, perfect for experimenting. And I guess it's like treating our own creator journey like an A/B experiment, right? Like we often say as product managers, like let's run an A/B test. So I guess over here as well, it's sort of experimenting and trying to see which steps worked out. Like, oh, that didn't fetch me enough traction. Well, it's okay. Let me just try another one.
Yeah, that's where also I think having two platforms also work. Like if, for example, I'll give you an example, right? If somebody is good at writing, maybe choosing Twitter and LinkedIn together, posting the tweets, the threads on Twitter, taking those, putting them in like a, like a carousel form and posting them on LinkedIn. So you have a cross promotion kind of going on there. I think having two platforms is really beneficial. More than two is like if you have more time, sure. But one platform also leads to kind of burnout if you don't see that traction in the beginning. So it's kind of that balance and testing as you go. Just there's no right or wrong. Keep going, consistent effort. I don't think you can get there.
Certainly. Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think with traction brings me to one last question that I had in terms of the whole community efforts. And people often talk about how to measure these activities that you do, right? Because community is a very can be very specific, can also be very abstract from the sense of dealing with people, because community is all about the people that form and the kind of content that you put out for your brand to be known. So what's good and bad about measuring the impact of these activities? And is there like a community conversion strategy that people often talk about in terms of all the websites and stuff like that? So is there one for community as well? And if so, what would you suggest?
So I am going to say I'm not, this is an area I am still learning a lot. I'm not an expert, right? So with community like measurement, but what I have seen other creators do as well is kind of going back to the goal. Now, when you start out a community, if you're starting out with social channels, what is ultimately the end goal? Do you want to maybe, start your own like a solopreneur business? Do you want to eventually build like a startup and you want to scale that startup? You want to, you want to truly be a creator? Maybe what is your eventually goal? Do you want to monetize your community? Or you're just sharing knowledge? So I think if the measurements can be with the goals. Eventually, for example, if you have a person starting out, if they want to maybe transition into being like a full-time content creator, right? Or maybe become a solopreneur, then to monetize, they're selling something to the community, right? Selling to their audience or something. So the measurement comes from that. So eventually it's kind of tied to those goals. you can take your community or your attention that you have in several different ways. So yeah, ultimately, I think it boils down to kind of what are those goals, and they're different for everybody, right? Everybody has a different kind of intention with their community. So
Yeah. So I guess then at every phase, go back to why you started this, what's the whole purpose. And even if it leads to different parallel directions or paths in between from these community conversations, you still go back to where you started. And I think it's also okay to like revise that, right? Like let's say you had a certain goal and you somewhere feel that you sort of fell apart from it. So yeah.
come back to it. Yeah, absolutely. Or eventually maybe you didn't think of that goal in the beginning,
Hmm.
but now that you have the traction and you found your kind of your people, that your community, maybe you want to take it, build a new goal with it, right? Eventually. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
those are some of the things I think about personally. And also, again, this is an area that I'm also learning. So
No, I'm glad all of us are on the learning phase because with community, I guess you can never say that you really mastered the art of finding the right people because like I said, with each step, you sort of figure out, oh, I kind of missed that. It's a good learning that I have right now. And you apply that and you get another 10 learnings. So absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much, Nazuk. I think this has been such a fun chat for me in terms of discovering what are some of the steps that you took for building product career. And I'm glad that there is a certain impact and change that you're trying to make, and which I also want fellow creators, founders, and builders to understand when they have the same journey that they share with you in terms of kickstarting a community or trying to engage their early believers in their product. So, thank you so much for sharing some of your thoughts.
thank you for having me, Ashwarya. It was a fun chat.
Thank you.